Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our monthly writing workshop for leading teen writers. Today, we are focusing on how to be concise in our writing and how that leads to being a more sophisticated writer. So we're going to go over a definition. What does it mean to be concise? Maybe you've heard it many times before. Maybe you've heard me asking you to revise a sentence to be more concise. This is all on a sentence level. So we're practicing editing, revising our first draft of our sentences to be more sophisticated. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we are not just blabbering on and on and on, typing as many words as possible, confusing our readers. We want to rein things in and to have control. And to be able to show sophistication means to be able to show that you can say what you want to say in fewer words. And so we're going to do a lot of practice today. So mostly you guys are going to be practicing. You're going to be changing sentences to be more concise, to be more sophisticated. But let's go over a couple definitions first, just in case you guys, and we're going to go over examples as well. So, concision and sophistication. What does it mean to be concise? Okay, I'm going to be calling on you guys to make sure you're ready to read. What does it mean to be concise? There's a couple definitions. Tanisha, can you read those 3 bullet points?
Yeah, giving a lot of information clearly and in a few words, free from all elaboration and superfluous detail, and brief but packed with information.
Okay, so it means making things shorter, going back and cutting out anything that's unnecessary. Let's say you're packing for a vacation, for example. Have you ever packed a suitcase and you couldn't close it because you brought too much stuff? I know I have that problem a lot because I always want to bring every pair of shoes that I have. But then I start to realize, okay, all right, I'm only going for 2 days. Maybe I don't need 5 pairs of shoes. If this has happened to you, you've probably gone through and taken some stuff, some unnecessary things, so that you can maybe condense down your suitcase so that you're going to be a little bit more free, carefree. You're not going to have so much stuff because that's very stressful and it's confusing to have too much stuff. Same thing with a sentence. Pretend you're going on vacation and you need to cut down the sentence so that it's going to be a lot easier to handle. You might think, oh, but if I cut down, it's going to make it seem like I'm not as detailed and smart. That's not true. Why is that not true? Michael, can you read that paragraph quotation at the bottom? Oh, I think you're muted. Are you still muted? I can't hear you. Can anybody else hear him? No. Give it one more shot. Okay, while you're working on your mic, Ryan, do you mind trying to read that for us?
Me?
Yeah, go ahead and read that quotation there.
Many students think that adding unnecessary sentences with long words will make their writing more impressive. But in fact,
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you, Michael. We can hear you. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. All right, go ahead and mute yourself for now.
But in fact, almost every reader values concision, since concise writing is usually easier to read, better thought out, and better organized. That is simply better writing. Merriam-Webster.
Okay, thank you. So as you guys can see here, this person has read a ton of students' writing. And they notice that a lot of students think like, oh, if I add big words and if I make my sentence really long, it will make me sound smarter and it will make me look impressive. But actually, readers can see right through that. And readers can see when you're trying too hard. But that's the opposite of being sophisticated. Being sophisticated means being subtle, means not giving everything, but holding back just to give the important details so that it's clear and organized and well thought out. A reader can tell if you've edited for concision, and they can tell when you didn't. Okay, going for the next. Why should we write with concision? Okay, Michael, do you mind going ahead and just reading this whole slide for us?
Why we write? Why write with concision? Strong writing is concise writing. Long-winded sentences and expressions can confuse your reader, making them have to read twice or three times to understand your point. Concise writing equals clear writing equals good writing. Long-winded writing equals confusing writing equals bad writing. The key to writing concisely is not necessarily changing the way you write, but improving the way you edit.
Thank you. Okay, how many times have I told many of you, don't worry about your first draft? You're always going to write really poorly on your first draft. Even great writers, even J.K. Rowling writes terribly on her first draft. But that's just because that's the nature of how our minds work. Our brains are just like, little streams with fish swimming through it, and we can't really get it organized. It's when you get it on paper the first time, it's not so great, but it's about rereading, seeing where you can change and where you can edit. So this really, being concise is actually not so difficult because you don't have to change who you are as a thinker. All you have to do is make sure you're being disciplined enough to go back and putting yourself in the mind of the reader. Is the reader going to be confused? Is it too long-winded for them? Okay, a couple more notes on being concise. Kayla, if you're there, can you read this slide for us?
To be concise does not mean to cut everything down in a sentence. If you cut down too much, you may lose the core meaning of your idea. Only look to see if you can take out things that don't really contribute to the core meaning of the idea. Sometimes you don't have to cut out an idea. You just have to reward it to make it slightly more brief and clear. This may not always be the case for more creative storytelling and fiction writing.
Yeah, we're focusing a little bit more on essay writing. The kinds of things that you're usually doing for school, where you're analyzing literature, or you're writing research papers, or you're writing persuasive essays. If you're going for creative storytelling where your teacher is like, add as much imagery and as much detail as possible, maybe you're not going to want to be as concise. So think about, it's about what genre are you writing? Are you writing a research paper? Are you writing a journalism article to be published for a mass audience? Or are you writing a very, very detailed creative fiction story or poetry, which forces you to use words in much more detailed ways? So think about being concise is not always, doesn't fit every genre. But it's the most important thing because I see every one of my students writing in a way that could be more concise. Okay, why is concision associated with sophistication? Tanisha, can you read this slide for us?
Sometimes the more smart you try to sound, the less sophisticated you appear to your reader. In other words, they can see right through your attempts to sound sophisticated. Sophistication comes from brevity, clarity, and using strong vocabulary when necessary, but not overdoing it.
Okay, I'm going to show you an example of a student who wrote a topic sentence for their conclusion of a research paper, and they really wanted to sound smart. So they're like, I'm going to pull out all the stops. I'm going to make it sound just like, woo, like I'm a PhD. I've written 10 books before, but I saw right through it. And I've noticed a way that they could be more concise, and actually it would make it even more sophisticated. So let's go read it. Okay. So this writer, like I said, wants to create a topic sentence for their research paper conclusion. It's the final, it's the first sentence of their conclusion. Let's read the not so sophisticated one. Ryan, do you mind reading the first sentence there where it says to summarize?
To summarize everything on the whole, we must take into account the every horrendous and unforgivable aspects of the lives of the Native Americans all over the U.S. and make a change since nothing has yet to be done about their deplorable and absurd conditions.
Okay. The truth is I wrote this. I wrote it because I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a student who doesn't really understand how to be concise. But there's a lot of problems with this sentence. And as a teacher, I would immediately ask my student to see where they can make a couple changes. But what are the kinds of changes that I think that they should make? Michael, can you read these bullet points to tell us what I, as a teacher, found problematic about this sentence? Go ahead and read all those 6 bullet points.
The writer sounds like they're trying too hard with too many in-your-face adjectives. There are a few unnecessary phrases that distract from the core meaning of the sentence. It keeps going on and on when it could have been more subtle and to the point. The writer unnecessarily adds we, even though this is meant to be an analytical paper. The writer adds too much sentiment instead of analyzing the material with a detached, unbiased point of view. This might be more suited for an impassioned, persuasive speech or creative fiction, but not for cool, calm-headed, analytical research writing.
Okay, good. So there's just too much. There's too much going on. There's like repetition, horrendous and unforgivable, deplorable and absurd. To summarize everything on the whole, we must take into account there's a lot going on. And I would cut down a lot of it because when you cut down, but you still have the core idea, you can actually sound more sophisticated. Kayla, can you read our more sophisticated conclusion sentence?
The shocking conditions of Native Americans have yet to be reconciled by U.S. authorities.
Good. Reconciled means they haven't been changed, or they have only been ignored. So I cut this down a lot because actually, if you think about it, it doesn't change the core idea of the sentence at all. The core ideas remained intact. I did not take away any meaning. All I took away was words. So the question is, why is this more sophisticated, even though it has fewer fancy phrases and words, and it's 1/3 of the size? Wouldn't it be more sophisticated if we added a bunch of vocabulary words that are big and also made it really, really super long? Well, that's actually not what sophisticated writing is. And so I just want you guys to think about that as you are writers, and to maybe think, have you ever committed these kind of crimes in your own writing? Well, they're not crimes. It's just, yeah, I've done it too, especially when I was younger. And so it really just comes in the editing process, and that's what we're going to practice today. But first, I want to show you a couple of examples of how to avoid really long-winded sentences and how to be more concise. And get ready, because I'm going to be calling on you guys a lot, and I'm going to be sharing my screen here. Okay, so this whole worksheet here is about how to write more concise sentences, and we're going to go through some of these activities and do lots more examples, and then I'm going to give you a ton of sentences and you guys have to correct them on your own. So we'll do a lot of writing today as well. So, writing concisely. Well, one technique. What is one technique to being a more concise writer? Well, it's by avoiding repetition. Well, this person calls it pruning the redundant, meaning taking away anything that you've repeated. Let's see. Kayla, can you read for us this example sentence here?
Many uneducated citizens continue to vote for better schools.
Okay, so they took out something. So the original sentence said, many uneducated citizens who have never attended school continue to vote for better schools. Kayla, why did this person in their editing process, not in their first draft, but in their editing, why did they go back and take away who have never attended school? Why did they take that out?
Because it already says uneducated citizens.
Very good, very good. Students do this all the time, but you don't notice because it's your first draft, right? I do this a lot too. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, uneducated. That kind of means you've never been to school before. So if I said who've never attended school, it's redundant and your reader is going to see it immediately. And they're going to be like, oh, okay, here's a not so sophisticated writer. You don't want that to happen. Well, there's a lot of phrases that we write that are that repeat themselves. So this is like a whole clause was repeated, but think about something like think about this phrase here. Oh, this is a biography of her life. Well, the word biography already means a book about someone's life. So it would be much better if you just said biography. And so there's a lot of ways that you can cut down sentences just from thinking about, have you repeated yourself? This happens in so much of my students' writing. She received a free gift. Well, a gift is something that's already free, so you can just say a gift. Let's think, I'm going to show you guys a couple more. So in order to sound fancy, someone might have said, in spite of the fact that, but why say in so many words what we already have one word to convey? Although, in the event that, okay, why don't we just say if? I'm going to be copying this, by the way, in the chat for you guys, so that when we do our activities, oops, that was only sent to Nisha, my bad. So that when we're doing our activities, you can come through and read all of these kinds of examples. What if you said, personally, I feel, or personally, I think? Well, to think something is personal. Only you can think that. So by adding personally, you're really just repeating yourself, and then your reader is going to get bored, confused. Okay, anyway, so that's all about repetition. What about reducing clauses to phrases, or reducing phrases to single words? So we want to condense like long sentences down into phrases, or phrases into words. Let's try it. Who do I want to have read? Tanisha, can you read this example here?
Okay, Smith College was founded in 1871. It is a premier all-women's college in the United States.
Okay, so what it says here, Smith College, which was founded in 1871, is the premier all-women's college in the United States. But what they're trying to show you is often when we add a which clause, it just adds more to the sentence. What if we could get rid of the word which and rewrite it like this? Tanisha, can you read this second one?
Founded in 1871, Smith College is the premier all-women's college in the United States.
So it was just kind of a fun way to cut down a little bit. And that way your subject, Smith College, is not separated from the verb is. Smith College, which was founded in 1871, is, well, why don't we keep Smith College and the verb together so that it flows nicer? And then we can just add that information before and get rid of which was. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do to be a more concise writer. What about this one here? Ryan, can you read this highlighted example?
Citizens who knew what was going on voted him out of office.
Okay, so that's an example of where we have a clause who knew what was going on? That's a long clause. Is there any way we can make it more concise? Well, this writer thought of a way to do that. Go ahead and read this highlighted, rewritten sentence here, Ryan.
Knowledgeable citizens voted him out of office.
Okay, so instead of saying who knew what was going on, which is a very long-winded clause, you could just take a word that means the same thing, knowledgeable, put it in front of citizens, and now you have a more concise sentence. Okay, let's do, oh, this is one that a lot of students do. So a lot of students add intensifiers in front of words that don't need to be there. These words are really, very, quite, extremely, severely, but these really aren't necessary. So if you say, the Native Americans had a really hard time, well, that's just adding an extra word really, and you're not being very sophisticated because you could take that out and it still pretty much can convey the same thing. And you can probably find a word that just means that they were treated, that is more precise of how they were treated. Okay, so don't use words like really, very, extremely, so, like this is so great, because it actually just is a filler word that isn't very sophisticated. Okay. So there is and it is a way that a lot of people start their sentences. There are, or there is, or it is. So I just want someone to read. Michael, do you mind reading this example here and I'll explain it after?
There are 25 students who have already expressed a desire to attend the program next summer. It is they and their parents who stand to gain the most by the government grant.
Okay, so oftentimes we will start a sentence, again, because we're not really thinking about it, we're just writing. We start a sentence with a very vague pronoun that means nothing. What does the word there mean? Well, it doesn't have really a meaning. It's actually just a pronoun. A pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. So the word there is not really a noun that has meaning. It's actually like a filler word, unless you're using it in a more precise way. So instead of saying there are 25 students who have already expressed a desire, you can cut out all of those and say 25 students have already expressed a desire. And then instead of saying it is they and their parents who stand to gain the most, well, let's just cut that out and we can say they and their parents stand to gain the most. When you cut out words, you're being more subtle, you're being more sophisticated, and there are and it is and there is are very good examples of how students always start their sentences. But can you be aware when you're doing it and make sure to go back and edit? Okay, good. Thank you, Michael. There are phrases that a lot of students add to writing because it sounds fancy, but we need to be very, very careful because even though they sound important, they actually add nothing to the meaning of the sentence. So it's like, think of like your diet, what you eat every day. You know how there's like nutritious foods that actually give your body nutrition? Like protein or good carbs or vegetables and fruit. Well, what if you also eat a lot of food that doesn't give you any nutrition? It just adds calories. A lot of these kinds of things are like candy, processed oils. Well, if you took those kinds of things out of your diet, you would just have a more nutritious, healthy life. Think about that with writing. If you add these kinds of phrases that are empty, you're just making a sentence that is long-winded and doesn't have meaning to it. Here's one example. People say this a lot. All things considered, Okay. Kayla, can you read the example sentence here?
All things considered, Connecticut's woodlands are in better shape now than ever before.
Okay. But what all things considered really just means is I want you to consider this. But if you're writing an essay, you're already implying that you want someone to consider your idea because you're writing it. So really, what's the point of saying all things considered? Unless you're writing a creative story and it adds something to the story. But look, they say, cut it out. Instead of saying all things considered, just say Connecticut's woodlands are in better shape now than ever before. It's get to the point, and you're avoiding adding that extra candy to the diet that doesn't really need to be there. Let's try another one. Michael, can you read this next one here, this highlighted thing?
As a matter of fact, there are more woodlands in Connecticut now than there were in 1898, and then the fixed version is there are more woodlands in Connecticut now than they were in 1898.
Good. Maybe saying as a matter of fact doesn't really matter, because if you say something like there are more woodlands in Connecticut now than there were in 1898, it kind of is a fact and people can see that it's a fact. So do we really have to say as a matter of fact? Anyway, I know it sounds kind of nitpicky, but these are just fun ways to think about, okay, are you adding a lot of fluff? What about this? Ryan, can you read this next one?
As far as I am concerned, there's no need for further protection of woodlands.
Good. Okay, so why not just get rid of as far as I'm concerned? Because when you're writing an essay, we are assuming that the things you're writing about are from your point of view. And so you really don't need to say that. Okay. I like this one last one. Kayla, can you read this one last one for us? Because of the fact that, let's see how they would cut that down. Read both the highlighted one and the corrected version.
Woodlands have grown in area because of the fact that farmers have abandoned in their fields. Woodlands have grown in area because farmers have abandoned their fields.
Okay, so I say because of the fact that when you could just say because. Of the fact that doesn't add anything. There's no meaning to it, and it may sound fancy, but you're showing your reader that you're not that sophisticated. Okay. All right. So I am going to have you guys kind of just take a look at these on your own. There's a lot of words that can be changed or omitted, meaning avoided or taken out. That will help you be a more concise writer. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing some exercises. I'm going to be giving you guys a chance to rewrite these sentences, all these sentences, to be more concise. But listen, some of the things you may not realize, well, how can I edit this? How can I be more concise? Well, since I've given you guys access to this sheet, I want you actually, while you're doing the exercises, to go back and see if there's anything in here that was in that sentence and what is their advice. So if you read a sentence and it says, the point I'm trying to make, but you don't really realize that that's an unnecessary thing to add, I want you to come after you read a sentence and see, is there anything in this document that is telling me what I can avoid? So even though you guys are rewriting the sentences, I still want you to go back and read this document so that you can learn as you're rewriting the sentences. So I don't want it to be like, oh, okay, we already went over the document. I don't need to go back and look at the examples again. Actually, I want you for each of these to go back and look at the examples so that you're learning as you're doing the exercise. How are we going to do this? Go to the Google Classroom. Hopefully everybody has access to the Google Classroom. And if you go to the classwork, there's an activity called Writing with Concision activity. And each of you should have your own document. I'm going to be on the document with each and every one of you because I'm going to be seeing your writing as you go. So what I've done is I've given you an area to rewrite all of the sentences. Activity A and B are really just the same thing. But we're just going to do the rest of class. We're going to practice this activity as much as possible because even though I've taught this lesson to students, they still don't necessarily write with concision. Why? Because it takes a lot of time and practice. It's not something that happens right away. So don't worry. This is not like, oh, you learned it today. It means that all of your writing is going to be concise now. No, it means that this is just the beginning and you're going to, over time, become a more concise writer. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. I know that some of you might still be working, but no worries. I just want to wrap up our workshop today by saying that you all, I have been looking at all of yours as you have been going, and all of these look amazing. Really, really, really amazing. Now, it's a lot easier to be concise when you're doing a concise activity and you know you need to be concise and you're practicing concision. It's a lot harder when you're actually doing your own writing and when you're even editing your own work. Sometimes we just miss it because it's all about awareness and consciousness. And the point of today was to make you just slightly more aware. It's slightly more conscious of what words you're adding to your sentences. It's probably easy to see now when someone has a really long-winded sentence. You're like, do you really need that? This doesn't mean you need to be a butcher and cut everything out, especially when it adds something creative, if it adds a little flavor to the sentence, or if it adds some deep meaning, but not if it's just something that doesn't really need to be there. So you all did an amazing job. On the Google Classroom, I actually posted the slides from today. So if you're ever doing your own essay for school and you don't have me to help you, and you're like, okay, what was that thing she was talking about concision? I'm going to go take a look at those slides again. So you'll have access to that. I'm going to also post this recording on the Google Classroom so you can come watch it anytime. And I just want to thank you guys so much for taking time out of your week to come and do this. And I hope that you learned a lot today. And thank you, really, thank you guys. So you are free to go. I will see you in 1 month. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thank you.